it. I screwed up as usual. Machine Head, Bush.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, you nailed it, dude. That was awesome.
It was the British grunge invasion.
Ooh.
Right? Remember?
Not to be confused with the early 2000s British invasion with Travis and Coldplay and Snow Patrol. Those were very different.
They were riding on the coattails of U2. I'm telling you.
Type of invasion by another Bush that took us 20 years.
This guy, I swear to God, should have his own show.
Not music related at all.
I know. He's always looking. He's going, what the hell is this song?
Well,
and he wouldn't know if I was screwing all of them up. That's the funny thing.
No, but I thought that Halen guy. I'm the one that gives you the raw feedback. I loved how that sound. I have no idea what the hell you were playing, but I'm like, all right, like Leonard's on it today.
Yeah, it did sound really good, man.
Yeah, until the end.
As usual, you need to go on the road.
Yeah. Well, it's called Machine Head by Bush. It's a cool song. It's really, really cool.
Is that the one there's like, breathe in, breathe out,
breathe
in. Yeah, okay. I remember that now. All right.
Yeah, it's a rocking song, man. So.
That is kick ass. Wow.
So, yeah. Hey, welcome everyone to IoT Coffee Talk. Yesterday was Steve Jobs, the 10th anniversary of Steve Jobs' death. Rest in peace, Mr. Jobs. Wow. What a profound day of techno sentiment and grief.
Yeah.
And mourning.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, our sentiment and grief for Steve Jobs was battling it out for headlines with Mark Zuckerberg trying to talk his way out of Facebook not being evil empire.
Well, I think he might have been right. You know, the guy had a lot of foresight if you think about it. He goes, wait a minute, there's something wrong with what you're doing, you know? Speaking of Facebook really quick, and maybe this is in honor of Steve Jobs and how right he was. It's maybe about a quarter of Steve Jobs, Facebook's fault. The rest of it are all these digital marketers. You know, they collectively create this gravity that kind of compels these guys to do what they do because it is all about engagement. And they would only do that if their revenue model, right? Their revenue model depended on ad dollars. If that pressure wasn't there, they wouldn't be doing any of this creepy crap. They would just let us communicate. They would let things go organically, you know?
You mean like the OG Facebook when it was just a steady stream of what your friends were saying?
Yeah, exactly.
And no algorithm?
Exactly. And maybe some of us would have paid a subscription for that valuable service, but instead they went full-blown freemium.
Yeah.
And like what I say with freemium is, you know, you get what you pay for.
You are the product.
Oh, you're the cow. You're the cow. So Steve Jobs, you were right.
Steve Jobs was right. Yeah. You know, what a guy. You know, did any of you guys read the big Walter Isaacson biography?
I did.
Yeah, that was really good. That was a huge book.
Yeah, it was. But it was a very fast read. I was surprised because I'm really crappy at reading.
Yeah.
Like the Dune novels. I'm still on. I bought like the whole series. I'm still on the first chapter. It's the only intro to a series that's worse than the Lord of the Rings or the Lord of the Rings.
Hobbit.
Yeah.
No, Hobbit was okay. Lord of the Rings, the beginning was like.
Why are you popping Sims over there, man?
Yeah, what the hell? What's wrong with you?
Well, it's better than popping tags like Macklemore.
Air tags?
Oh my God.
Such a smart ass. Dude, you are quick, man.
Yes, but
Seinfeld.
Thank you, Steve Jobs, for all this love, for what's behind our beloved friend here in San Diego. Look at that Mac behind you.
Yeah.
That Macintosh is beautiful.
Yes. And it still works.
A lot of people would be surprised. A lot of young people would be surprised that there was something that advanced in the hands of regular people in the 1980s.
Yeah.
A lot of people think real computing, graphical, the stuff we think of today really didn't start getting going until sometime in the 90s. And no doubt about it, certainly Microsoft languished in DOS forever, and Unix was command line as well. But the Mac, based on what they saw at Xerox PARC with the Alto, we had graphical computing by 1985, 1984.
Yeah.
Which is pretty remarkable. I remember going off to college at the University of Texas, and the computer center, whatever they were selling Macs, and it was like revolutionary,
Think about it. He knew. He went with education first. That was like their market, because he knew that he can influence. If he could get the younger generation, the next generation, using PCs for school, because it wasn't really. I mean, Macs really struggled to make it into the business domain, and that's why PCs did so well.
Right.
But
because as Steve Jobs would say in an interview, Microsoft was attached to, as a startup, was attached to a Saturn V rocket called IBM that helped them get into an orbit that they may not have been able to do on their own, right? If you think of Microsoft as a startup in the late 70s and the 80s, started off just building languages, right?
Right.
And then apps for the Mac. If it wasn't for IBM licensing DOS, and then IBM's marketing and entrenchment in the enterprise, right, business, that made it harder for Apple. Obviously, we all know all the stories about Jobs getting fired from his own company by Scully, and talk about Apple going into the dark times from all the rest of the 80s until 96, 97, when Steve came back to save the company. They were 90 days from turning out the lights at Apple. Talk about a bunch of idiots who almost ran that company into the ground.
Soda pop.
Yeah.
Soda pop CEO.
Yeah. I just want to say, this is like power to individuality. I know teams are important and lots of people are important, but that's a lesson in the power of one person, in the genius, in the force of will, in decision-making of one human to change the course of a massive company, when so many other smart people, smart managers, basically were just running that company into the ground with all their great decisions, everything I learned about business, I learned working at Pepsi.
Are you talking crap about the Woz?
No,
Woz fighting words, gone. Man. He's my teddy bear.
A lot of people don't realize
he's my techno teddy bear, man.
Woz punched out of Apple early on, actually.
Oh yeah.
Which is ironic and weird.
He's a technical guy. He was holding on to the Apple II.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the business. I'm just talking about the business people.
Oh yeah.
Who, and this goes back to I've been posting some stuff recently, I was this time I was doing it on Audible. I was re-listening to The Innovator's Dilemma, from Clayton Christensen, which I would argue everyone should read or listen to that once a year, especially if you're in the business of doing startups or innovation. There are so many great lessons to be learned, and it's not just some guy's opinion. It was based on case studies of all these companies saying, look, the best run companies, the best managed companies still go down in flames because they don't know how to react to disruptive technologies that are barbarians at the gate. Yeah. And so, you had great managers who came in to run Apple when Steve Jobs was gone, and where to get them, it's funny. I remember one of the case studies, everybody, maybe you might remember the Apple Newton.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I thought you didn't want to talk about him. This is awesome. You're like a history book of Steve Jobs, man. You know everything about keep going. I remember the Newton. I remember the Palm Pilot.
That's what our talk today is about, is Steve Jobs. So we're gonna we'll talk about Apple. We're going to talk about Next. We'll talk about Apple 2.0. We'll talk about Pixar. You know, when Steve Jobs was brought back into Apple in that first giant meeting he was at, the public, conference, remember how he introduced himself? What is so funny?
Look at David.
What is so funny? I thought we were talking about Steve Jobs.
We are, but David is like typing in Steve Jobs on Wikipedia to figure out who he is, right?
Oh my God. But I like to hear from Rob instead of from an Audible book that I can download. So
okay.
You've got this is what I look like when you have my undivided attention.
I know.
Maybe I shouldn't have said this here because now the people I do Zooms with, they're going to know when I'm like,
otherwise you're looking up garbage trucks. You're looking up garbage trucks. Okay, keep going. Newton.
So Steve Jobs. Well, remember Steve Jobs when he came back, he was introduced. He was the interim CEO, if you remember, for quite a while. And I just remember the very first time he introduced himself to this giant audience was, "Hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm the CEO of a company called Pixar." And also, a lot of people don't realize Steve Jobs became a billionaire not because of Apple, but because of Pixar. Yeah.
And think about how incredible that was, man. I mean, what an incredible company. And then he sold it to Disney, right?
Oh,
did I just ruin your story?
Well, guess who became the largest single shareholder in Disney? And guess who's the largest single shareholder now of Disney?
His wife.
Steve Jobs' wife, his widow. Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty interesting how things play out, isn't it? Gosh, yeah, you're right. If we go back in time, there's so many great lessons. If you talk about Steve, those two Steves, with Jobs and Wozniak, doing the garage thing, right? And, Woz was all about how can I take a DEC PDP-11 and make it smaller and smaller. He was all about miniaturization, right? Which ultimately led to the PC. How do I take a mini computer and get it down? And, and they're building these things on plywood, right? Initially, and building stuff out.
First Apple One, yeah.
Yeah. And that's really, it was more of just a geeky challenge for Woz to build that stuff, and then Jobs was working at Atari, building Super Breakout and stuff like that, and never taking showers because he had some weird belief. And if you remember reading the Isaacson book, a lot of people were really disturbed by the fact that he tried to go with a natural scent or whatever.
It's pretty nasty.
He was into all kinds of stuff, right? When he went to Reed College for a short time before he dropped out, he got into taking acid and going off to these farms in Oregon where they had these, I don't know if they were cults or whatever they were, spiritual deals. And he kind of went down a path. In fact, remember, he often would say to Bill Gates, in addition to how Microsoft has no taste, he would say, if Bill Gates took LSD, it would really help him and really open his mind.
I remember that. Yeah.
It would certainly have helped his dance moves and Ballmer's too.
Oh, yeah. Did you watch that one video where all of them are up there dancing? Yeah, that was pretty.
Yeah, that Windows 95 launch. Talk about white guys dancing, no rhythm, no. I mean, that's, in fact, they're worse than white guys. They're total power nerd geek white guys, got nothing.
Yeah. You know what? They have some really good white guy dancers. So let's not take anything away from them. Let's just say that those guys are dance challenged rhythmically and artistically. Yeah, they're artistically challenged. They just solve problems. That's what
a good friend would say.
That's what those guys were good at.
Dancing is not their superpower.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know what, man? You know what I thought was always funny is that this portrayal that Steve Jobs was not this nice guy, not this like sort of kumbaya guy. People getting like bent out of shape about it was just really hilarious. Because I want to go back to your comment about individuality. Dude, this guy, I mean, he was a straight up for what he did and what he was doing, nobody shared that vision. Only he knew. And then he had some foresight that came along with it, which, I mean, think about it. 10 years after, man, this thing changed everything. It's changed our lives, and it's just still going to change our lives for the next 20 years in residual effects, whether or not this is the dominant device that we carry around or not. Even though I do believe this is not going to go away anytime soon, and AR glasses are.
You're right. It's totally the dominant device. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry that half of it's made in Korea. It's made in China, but Samsung provides mucho parts.
Designed in Cupertino, though. That's the important
thing. In Cupertino, assembled by Foxconn with many components from our good friends in South Korea.
Yeah, and think about it.
Who happen to be their biggest competitor, right?
Right. But these guys can still lead. And I think a lot of it just happens. I mean, you want to talk about leadership and succession. I don't know how he did it, but somehow they created a succession strategy that not only took what he was doing forward, but it amplified it somehow, because it's insane how many things that they have their fingers in. And they're really changing the game. And it's hilarious that people on Wall Street, and there's still these fanboys, I guess you want to call them, that trash him for not being an innovator. But that's exactly what he was. He may not have invented stuff, but he was an innovator. He took stuff that was already there, like the Parks stuff for the mouse, and he found an application for it. That's called innovation. Inventing it was what, Xerox, Park did. And people they get that confused all the time.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference between invention and innovation. And this dude, Jobs, was the ultimate innovator. He knew how to sit there and take all these inventions, assemble them, get it into just a friggin' ridiculous application. And that's how he won. He did it with Pixar. Think about all the technologies that went into Pixar and making animation. CGI today is all that stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about a company that changed movies forever and made them just ridiculously cheesy.
Let's just talk about a company that basically rescued Disney, because Disney had run out of gas. Their animated stuff was like in the gutter.
Beauty and the Beast.
And then Pixar.
CGI. Huh?
I mean, look at the jump of Pixar's first animated shorts. Pick whatever, and then compare it to at the time Disney's latest animated full-length movie. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're used to how Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and all these things look like. But when Monsters Inc. came out, even, like me, like I'll identify, like I'm part of that, Disney generation. It's like, oh, wait, what is that?
What is that?
What is that? And
sounds like my son.
Well,
he does that all the time.
It's like,
what's that?
You're talking about, now you're talking about the difference between like inventing and innovation. But, one of the things that I think was done very well in context of that Disney to Pixar jump was even the introduction of the brand. That Disney logo with a little, pixie dust hadn't changed in forever. And now you get these letters individually animated with different attitudes with the lamp and all this thing in full on Dolby surround sound. It completely changed the animation game, and look where it's at today. And so I agree with Rob that no Pixar, Disney would be a free option under PBS 72 on all cable boxes today.
No.
Yes. Also, but the acquisition. So Disney Pixar was making the content, and they used Disney to distribute their content. And that's kind of how Disney first got involved with them. And then Pixar just started becoming a hit machine, right? Yeah. Toy Story, all those movies. Okay. Yeah. And so them acquiring them because they had to, they were probably, they were totally going to go out of business, and so that brought new life. Of course, this also led to something I refer to every once in a while when I'm watching TV. Do you know how we have antitrust stuff in this country to make sure companies don't become monopolies and too big? Yeah. Did anybody notice that somehow the U.S. government trade guys just allowed after Pixar, Disney just kind of kept acquiring Marvel and all these other players, and now they own Star Wars, they own everything. And I think if Disney had been in another industry, I don't know if those deals would have been allowed to go through, because it seems like Disney almost owns everything now.
No, they're far from. See, I do a lot of antitrust related research, and it's not even close. They're not even close to having a monopoly here in the U.S. And it's really difficult to triangulate what the specific market would be where you could argue that there's like a violation of the Sherman Act. And they're hyper competitive. It's just like, a lot of the companies that industries went after only for the courts to decide that, these guys they may be a monopoly. By the way, being a monopoly is not illegal. Anti-competitive behavior is. And, if you want to think, that's how Microsoft still is together. I mean, they have almost 90% of the market share in the PC OS market. But when you expand the field more and you look at all endpoint devices and personal computing devices, their market share is actually pretty tiny, or at least it's on, you have the whole iOS and Android all of a sudden coming into the mix. So Can you consider Microsoft a monopoly? Well, you really can't, when actually mobile continues to be more valuable than the PC market.
This takes us back to Steve Jobs saying a quote, "The future is long." Yeah. He would say that. People would say, what's going to happen? What are you going to do? And he would say, the future is long. And that who's the leader today may not be the leader in the future. Like nothing is set in stone. Microsoft, as Jobs would say, Microsoft got a really big head start on Apple because Steve was gone and Apple was in the desert until the late 90s. And Microsoft finally got it together kind of when they launched Windows 95, I would guess, is when they really started having something that didn't look like total garbage, right? And so antitrust, can you say Microsoft was a monopoly in antitrust in the 90s and early 2000s? Yeah, you could probably say that, because there was no mobile component yet. It was like you either had a computer or you didn't, and it was always Windows. And Apple had a just single-digit percentage, right? But you're right. The smartphone market changed everything. Once we got to, let's say, after 2010, when iPhone started really picking up speed, Android started picking up speed, no doubt about it. If you count those, then you're right. Windows doesn't dominate anymore. Absolutely. And so time changes lots of things, right? Yeah. Your empire rules the world or the galaxy in this decade, and the next decade, somebody else is ruling the galaxy,
Yeah. But I think Steve Jobs, he was a jerk, and I like it. I'm comfortable with that. I have no problem with the fact that the guy was not a pleasant person to be around, that he bossed people around. And for, all the talk today about work-life balance and, diversity and inclusiveness. I mean, this dude is the guy who invented A team, B team. There's no such a thing as a C team. You don't get hired in a company. I mean, that's like super exclusive, right? He only wanted the best people working for him. He had no patience. He wanted his teams busting their butts, doing the best that they can. Yeah. And if they didn't, he didn't care if they left. He booted their asses out of the company. You know what? People who are artists do that. that have this passion and love for craft, and to infuse that into the culture of your company, to do that somehow. And I don't know how he's done that. I thought it was Johnny Ives who kind of was the guy who carried that mantle. But as long as they continue doing that, and then that they're going to be around for a really long time, because that's what differentiates them. Do you know what I'm saying? All the stuff that, everything's going to the cloud, all these conventional notions of what the tech world of tomorrow is going to be like. Wait until people start, figuring out where CapEx lands. And they're going to start to realize that all these things that you think are real huge growth areas are actually lower margin than you thought. And Apple will keep being able to sell, friggin' watches, these smart watches for $1,000 easily. No one hesitating to buy it. I mean, because there's definitely something more than just the technologies and the specs, which is what a lot of the market pundits have been focusing on, which haven't mattered at all. I mean, think about it. All the crap that people have been saying about Apple and Steve Jobs, and they've all been proven just tremendously wrong, because if they were right, Apple, number one, wouldn't be as big as it is today. And number two, it wouldn't be like almost, what is it? They're like a $2.4 trillion company.
Yeah, I mean, they have.
That's not bad for a crappy company. So, what do you think, David?
Well, going back to
how do you feel based on the research that you're doing?
No, my knowledge of Apple, like I don't. I'll be honest, like I don't. I know. What is it? Bytes of Steve Jobs. Where I'm close to was the HomeKit stuff. What the Apple iPhone did to the telco industry globally. The behavioral change that it from consumers. Because if folks didn't work at a mobile provider, you have to realize that when the iPhone came out, most smartphones were not really expensive, and here comes this brand out of nowhere, and it's like, you cheapo, $700. I mean, and it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, I can get a few Windows CE Palm Pilot devices, a couple of LG, and they changed everything. They changed absolutely everything. And I say this because I have there were, as an industry, to keep it general, there were so many things that we were wrong about that Apple, as a design manufacturer, whatever you want to call it, knew, and they just knew. It's like they had a crystal ball, and they were 3 years out, and they were calling every shot, and it was right, and it was right, and it was right. And it beat the marketing to submission, to the point of like, now, I mean, my iPhone is cracked. Now I'm going to keep it until it ceases to work. But guess what my next phone is? Whatever. Well, I buy 2 generations.
Samsung.
That saves me like $300.
Yeah.
Not Samsung, Leonard, but work keeps me Android out. But so anyway, and this
work keeps you Android out.
Yes.
Work. Verizon.
Yes. I get a work issued Samsung device, and I always choose Android so that I can have one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
We do have choices. We do have that choice. You could be a Verizon employee and have a different operating system. So please come. We're hiring.
No, I agree. In fact, I would like to take a moment of silence here, and we're just to remember that it was Verizon that put Android on the map. Verizon spent the marketing money. Verizon spent the money to do a deal with Lucasfilm to license Droid. And those Droid, because Verizon quickly realized that obviously AT&T had something on their hands with that Apple exclusive. Yeah. And so Verizon had to battle back, and boy, did they ever battle back, man. That Droid campaign and those Droid devices,
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was sci-fi. It was so cool. And it worked. And you know what? Because Android was going nowhere until Verizon made it go somewhere.
Yeah, but you know what? You're making it. And you know what was funny at the time? They were laughing. I mean, there were a lot of industry folks laughing at the exclusive deal that Apple had with AT&T. That was the genius move. They were laughing at the genius move. Do you know what I'm saying? And, you know, for the telco industry, always bragging about how it was the network that enabled all these apps and stuff. It's like, no. If it wasn't for the iPhone, AT&T would have never been pushed to expand its network and build out its, capacity, because it was the iPhone that was driving all the data demand. And that was also mega money for them. I mean, think about it. Like you said, the first iPhone, $700. And back then it was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me, dude. You want me to pay $700 for a friggin',
It almost made Steve Ballmer seem reasonable, didn't it? When he's holding up the first, he's like, who's gonna buy an $800 phone? It doesn't even have a freaking keyboard.
Yeah, it doesn't have a keyboard. We need
who's gonna buy
microscopic keyboard?
and I just to fact check, I just Googled how much the original iPhone was, and it was $500. But still
that was still a lot.
That was a lot back then. Outrageous amount of money.
Yeah, plus tax and all the other fees and stuff like that. It was more.
Yeah, you know what's funny? In the state of California, and I believe it's the case till today. But you would, in the state of California, you will pay tax on the full retail price of a phone. So if you were buying a $10 phone, but full price was $500, you would pay the tax. Will seem outrageous. Well, it kind of leveled it out with the iPhone, because you're already paying $500 for the thing. It's tax seemed like nothing. And then back to HomeKit. I don't think Apple did anything for IoT. I mean, honestly, I think okay. Consumer
talked about it last week, dude.
Well, sorry.
Not it. Oh no. I'm going to have to correct you after this, but go ahead.
Okay.
Tell me.
Please.
You already said it. Apple has done nothing for IoT.
Beyond HomeKit, not in a branded product, not in a branded lineup. It's just like, hey, here's what we've got. Here's the framework, go develop. But in enterprise, I'm sorry, I'm not in any conversation with any enterprise customer talking about leveraging HomeKit.
It's true. HomeKit has not gotten traction.
So correct me. I learn something new every day.
No, you're right. Nest got traction. Well, Google Home got traction. Alexa, Echo's got traction, and HomeKit's gone nowhere. I think even Samsung Smart Things did better.
I'll have to look into that. You're probably right. I mean, I use HomeKit, and actually, like I've said in the past, I'm actually thinking of deprovisioning a lot of stuff in my house because it's just worthless. It's just sending, the Ring that I have. Oh my God. I just want to rip that thing off the wall, Yeah. I hate that thing. Yeah. It always has issues. And then it's doing creepy crap, like sharing the camera views from my neighbors and stuff like that.
Yikes.
Like, I could care less about a coyote in your front porch. I mean, really, it's just, I don't know, super annoying. But yeah, okay. Well, if you define it that way, touche. Yeah.
So, looking back over your shoulder there at your Mac, it's probably also might be important to point out to our viewers that even before Steve Jobs was fired, he was already pushed down and back because he was already acting out and causing problems. The reason he was on the Mac team was because he had effed up so badly and was already in hot water with the Apple Lisa. A no compromise, amazing device that had a mouse, had a graphical interface, had all this stuff, and cost over $10,000 or $12,000.
Yeah.
Nobody could afford it. And so he was stuffed into a box, and then he got himself onto this little tiny team. And it's like, how can we make a cheap Apple Lisa, right? You know, that like
it was still $2,000 more than $2,000 back then.
Yeah, compared to what a PC would cost. You're right, absolutely. And so so he was already in hot water. And then, but you're right. Everyone creates a narrative for themselves and others, you know, and that the magic that happened with the Mac team. And also, that's a good lesson in the importance of using small teams, because it was not hundreds of people building the Mac. It was a little small team. You know how Amazon all talks about 2 pizza-sized teams for developing. You know, that's great. It's right on the money thinking there.
Yeah.
And so you're right. He gets to launch the Mac in front of everybody. He's wearing a tuxedo. It's exciting. And then, you know, he's fired before the year's over, which is so interesting. You know, a disruptive technology like the Macintosh. It's, you know, that's another lesson kind of from Innovator's Dilemma. The problem with companies when they start making a bunch of money, and the more money they make, the more they have to make to keep that growth that is required for your stock price to go up. And it just keeps getting harder and harder to do, almost impossible. And so when you go after disruptive technologies, oftentimes it's either non-existent or smaller market, and the product might be lower margins. It may not perform as well as upscale market. You know, it may have all these attributes that seem like red flags, and yet all those red flags together equals disruptive product. And it's going to create the market of the future, but not necessarily the one of the present. But if you're not working on the market of the future and you put all your money into the market of the present, guess what? You turn into Blockbuster Video, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? So I know everyone, well, a lot of people quote bits and parts of his book, his series. It's not just one book. I read the whole series. He's not right on everything. So caution to folks out there. If he was right, EVs wouldn't have gone the way that they did, and it wouldn't take a premium product like, this top-down approach for the market to make itself happen. So lesson 1, because a lot of people were reading his books and they were trying to hit the bottom of the market, EVs for the masses. That wasn't the way to go. And I think that was imprinted in the brains of a lot of analysts who insisted that Tesla would only be successful if and make it if they had EVs for the masses. But in reality, they had to have a high margin premium, subsidize the growth of the company. Otherwise, they would have died. They wouldn't have had a market. They had to demonstrate that the EVs were better in many regards than ICE vehicles. And they did that. That's what they did for the first 10 years, if you really think about it. And then now, in the span of 10 years, EVs, in many ways, kick the crap out of ICE vehicles that have been evolving. And we're talking about the high end, evolving for over 100, and even more than 100 years, 140 years, right? That's pretty incredible. And I don't think that the professor, rest his soul, got all that right. And he's just human. But you shouldn't call his thesis a law of nature, which is what he did in his preface.
But he talks a lot. Obviously, the context with the time period when he wrote the original book. You're right. He talked to automakers during the 1990s about electric. Every one of them was making EVs back in the 90s. All the big three, everybody was, and part of that was driven by California, because California required 2% of your fleet to have EV capability all the way back in the early 90s. And so they had no choice but to make them. But remember, they kept saying the same thing. No one's going to buy these things until we have a breakthrough in battery technology. Because remember, they were using lead acid batteries inside. Chrysler was like packing a bunch of lead acid batteries into a minivan. And, they would joke and they go, well, would you buy an electric vehicle, which is when you get in it, it's the equivalent of your fuel gauge light already being on your normal gasoline car as soon as you start driving it, because lead acid batteries, obviously, they just didn't have the range, it certainly technological breakthroughs made that market possible, right? Yeah. Going to lithium ion certainly helped a lot. So the other part of Steve Jobs was when he was left, because we're still talking about Steve Jobs, Mr. Leonard with a smile on your face. When he was canned, he's out there in the wilderness, and guess who he got a phone call from? Ross Perot, who ran for president and who started EDS, and who was a rebel who told IBM to go to hell because he was a lifelong IBMer. And he told them, you know what? I think software is going to be more important than hardware. And they're like, you're full of shit. And he's like, all right, I'm out of here. And he created EDS and changed the world. Well, Ross Perot calls Steve Jobs and says, whatever you want to do, I'm going to back you, because Perot was a billionaire and he believed in that man. And so Jobs started Next Computer, which was the ultimate no compromise kind of Unix workstation.
Yeah. Beautiful machines. Oh my God. Oh, even back in 92.
Yeah. Like that Next Cube. I remember going to see that. It was the ultimate state of the art. And for all you kids out there who think that that's not relevant, Next is what you're using today.
Well, maybe if you're using a Mac. If you're using a Mac,
no. It's in the iPhone too. It's also in the iPhone.
That's true.
It made it over a sliver of it.
Imagine that.
So it was the Carnegie Mellon microkernel that they built Next on, and it was this radical graphical interface, and it was the ultimate no compromise workstation. And like the Lisa, it was horribly expensive. Some people bought it. Also, for those of you who are on the web today, you can also thank Steve Jobs and Next, because Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web on a Next computer that Steve Jobs created.
Right.
Because he was working at CERN in Geneva, and he had a Next workstation, and he built the web on that. And
I totally forgot about that. You're right.
So we got to there's all these weird circles that tie back to
it was like he was everywhere, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's insane too. Like sit back. Like I think this is my top 3 favorite show, at least that I've learned the most. But it's insane to think that one individual, whether by his vision or delegating vision or getting people excited about stuff, and literally has touched everything in a society for decades and more to come, right?
Yeah,
that's truly mind-blowing.
And here's the thing that no one talks about a lot. They don't talk about a lot. I'm going to go back to this whole thing that I said earlier, that he was an artist and he appreciated creativity. So you have invention. Yeah, they do some of that. Okay. He did some of that. He's on patents and crap like that. Definitely from design, right? There's innovation, and then there's creativity, and there's a whole market for that. All that media stuff, all the stuff he was doing with film, like, Pixar. It wasn't just the technology. I mean, the dude was making movies, right? Or working really closely with creators, enabling them. And when you think about it, that's what the whole Apple strategy was about from the beginning, is how do we put computers in front of people so that they can create and be productive and XYZ. So it's not just hardware, software. Eventually they went into all they're in all forms of services now and content. And part of their ecosystem is, the biggest part is the creatives, the people who basically use Apple stuff to create things, and GarageBand. People used to laugh at GarageBand. It's like, dude, man, when I was a little kid, I would have killed for GarageBand.
Think about how many modern day
it was free. Bands. It comes with, dude.
A lot of modern day bands use GarageBand to play all their instruments.
Yeah. And so when people sit there and brag about their device, or our device is better than the iPhone, or our software is, just maybe a permutation of what iOS is, those are so trivial compared to the bigger picture, right? Of what Steve Jobs' vision and assholery, because you know what? I think he was a jerk. And again, I love him for it, because if he wasn't an asshole, none of this stuff would have worked. If he was, and that's a lesson for exceptionalism. It doesn't come from conformance or just, catering to everybody. It literally is, you have this very unique vision and you pursue it with your own personal veracity and like passion. And then like crazy crap happens. And then you bring along these people who just tune into that insanity, and insane stuff happens. And, when you look back on what this dude did, it's just like friggin' ridiculous.
So many,
and the residual impact.
Do we accept his assholery and revere the guy because he was right about so many things? Do we accept it? Now, I'm just, now that you know.
No, we do. You know what?
Have to go and read. Well, because here's the thing.
I think I wrote this. I actually posted it. He was so right. You didn't care he was an asshole.
But to David's point, that's very Machiavellian.
Yeah. And also like right now, I would love to like ask, look.
Too bad.
Just being devil's advocate. To that last comment, like this, like I would love to now read anecdotes of those people that were in that room with Mr. Jobs, and I'm interested in how they feel, years after. Because here's the thing, Leonard, if we take two scenarios, Steve Jobs being unkind, a-hole of all sorts, but the ideas, the creativity, the product, the delivery, everything is bomb, right? And there's that. Now let's grab the opposite scenario where another a-hole, very pushy, and everything just bombs.
No vision.
I mean, that it's a horrible, we should do a horrible bosses IoT Coffee Talk episode.
Right? Yeah.
But just saying.
No vision. Asshole with vision, no vision will not go very far being an asshole.
But you're so right about the creativity and the types of people he worked with, and remember what he would always say is like, start with the user experience and work backward from there,
Yeah, but not from what the customer wants. What people get confused all the time is they think that it's knowing what the customer wants. They created stuff that customers didn't even know that they wanted, and that you cannot confuse. And so when you quote Steve Jobs and you say, well, the customer comes first, it's like, no, your interpretation of what you want the customer to experience. It's that creative thing. It's the forward thinking stuff, right? That's very what makes
interesting.
The difference.
Very interesting concept, because a lot of people are fighting tug of war with that concept right now, and have for a while, because there's a whole lot of people today, and this has been going on for quite a while. They've looked at the success of Amazon. And Amazon's the one who started the whole talk about customer obsession.
Yeah.
And I noticed that every giant company now talks about we're customer obsessed and and yet both Steve Jobs and Dr. Christensen say customer obsession will lead to your downfall.
Yes.
Because you know what? All those great companies that were killed by the barbarians at the gate were customer obsessed and did whatever the customer told them to do. And they all ended up going down into the ash heap of history.
Right. Because services is replicable. It's a services concept, right? It's not differentiated in the long term, and it's low margin.
Yeah.
And if you look at the rest of Amazon's business outside of AWS, which is still it's a digital services business. But when you look at if you rank it in terms of the margin, historical margin, it's the lowest. You don't want to be a IT services company.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody. Just to remind everybody what the cloud is. It's a managed service. That's all it is. It's a managed service.
And it might be OpEx for you. It's CapEx for the guy who has the $1.6 trillion valuation. And
They have to do the upfront cost, and none of those clouds would have been built without all that money from Amazon retail. And then Azure would not have been able to be built if Microsoft didn't have piles of money laying around to do that initial CapEx to build data centers all over the planet and lay fiber and all that stuff. No doubt about it. You know, the other good stuff about Steve Jobs, obviously people talk about when they created the original Mac or Apple One rather, based, you know, it was always that we didn't know that it couldn't be done. I always talk about really, really smart people, engineers who've done it all, been at many rodeos, and them trying to be innovators and startup people. And they fail all the time because they self-sabotage, because they say things like, oh, this is so obvious. Everyone knows how to do this, or anybody can do this, or this is that, whatever. It's because they're so smart. And I always talk about the a little bit naive founder who maybe doesn't know as much and doesn't know it can't be done. And they've got that stick-to-itiveness where they keep persistence. Those are the ones who succeed. And so the Apple One was, we didn't know we couldn't build a mini computer on a piece of plywood and put a cheap case on it and sell it and make the first personal computer, you know? And then, of course, you know, when we think of the return of Steve Jobs in the late 90s, they made the most amazing advertisement. It was black and white. It was about the crazy ones. And it was all about the greatest artists and thinkers of all time. And that's kind of how Steve Jobs thought of Apple. And remember, he said it was the ones who are crazy enough to think they could change the world that are the ones that often do. You know? Yeah.
I mean, I mean, if you never try, it never happens. It's so true. So even if you haven't, I mean, but you got to have huevos grandes. Yeah. Sorry.
Hey, but you know what?
My pronunciation is okay there.
You're good, Leonard. You're good.
We will take that person in the arena any day over all the spectators in the audience that are throwing stones at them and criticizing them. You know, you got to try. You got to put it out there and try. Life is short, man.
Yeah. You know? Otherwise, you're just part of the noise. And he was like a really strong signal. I mean, you know, in retrospect, it's pretty insane when you look at his footprint on just the world. It's pretty crazy. I guess. I mean, I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And it's fun chatting with you guys on this. Wow, this is gonna be a really long episode, guys. It's like more than an hour long. So, moment of silence for Steve Jobs. Rest in peace. Thank you for all the crazy stuff that you did, and you know, yeah.
And thank you.
That's all I got to say about that. What?
And thank you for picking a good, stable supply chain genius operator from Compaq Computer named Tim Cook to succeed you.
Yeah,
because he has done a great job of running that ship
and dismantling. I mean, just killing all expectations. The doomsayers basically just telling them, "You guys don't know what you're talking about." That's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, thank you for a stable and reliable consumer grade. You know,
I love that consumer grade. It's better than enterprise. It's more than enterprise and carrier grade.
Yes,
consumer grade.
Steve, we know that you're listening to this in your cryogenic chamber. You know, this is Rob, Tiffany, Leonard Lee, David Vasquez coming to you from another thing you influence, content, right? Being delivered with the things that you made. But yes, this has been IoT Coffee Talk on the anniversary, on the 10th anniversary plus 1 day of Steve Jobs passing. We hope that you folks have enjoyed the history lesson from, you know, Buddha IoT, Mr. Tiffany himself, with some commentary from Mr. Lee, and then the deadpan, ridiculous stuff coming from my mouth. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Please like and share. And if you like this episode to be done with managers that have been the opposite of Steve Jobs and have completely bombed and driven companies into the ground and are being investigated by the government right now, just comment. We will do an episode and we will deliver. We are not sponsored. We talk about what we want to talk about, and we give it to the community. Thank you for listening, folks.
Awesome. All right, guys, take care. See you next week.